AD After Death #3, writer Scott Snyder, art by Jeff Lemire.
This was a terrific finish to this series.
I was lamenting. I'm like, this is 80 pages, Alex. It's like, I'm done with this week's books. All I have to read is AD After Death. And I think I was more than halfway done. And I was like, oh my God, I'm on page 50. And I've been reading this book for like 45 minutes.
But it was 80 pages, and we didn't, like, we got some of the background, but most of it was... it was all leading. It was explaining exactly what's going on, how we got to where we were, and it was driving the story forward.
Mm-hmm.
So this was at no point a chore, and this was largely like a prose book. Like, it was very minimal art in a lot of places and just a shit ton of text, but it was really well done text. I don't know why I like this so much, and I don't like anything else Scott Snyder does.
I like it because it's different. The fact that it's so text heavy. My only complaint really is I'm kind of nitpicking here, but I realize why they did it, because it's an Image series, and I don't think there's a lot of... What's that?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I don't know if people are going to be on board for this series going on a little bit longer. I feel like this...
It's over.
No, I'm saying this book would have been better had it been stretched over, like, I think maybe 6, 7, 8, 9 issues maybe, as opposed to every issue is like 60, 70, 80 pages.
I don't think it matters, because it didn't come out every month. So it's okay. It was a meaty book. It has a lot of content within each page, and it did tell a contained story, and that's my favorite kind of comic. I almost feel bad spoiling this because but that's what we do on this show.
We read it for a reason, okay?
Out of everything. Yeah, it's like we spoil the shit out of everything, so we're going to spoil what happened. So in the last book, we found there was this incredibly sick, looked like she was dying girl.
Mm-hmm.
And we didn't know what the deal with that was, but we knew that what was going on was at some point they developed basically a drug that stopped people from aging, but they only had 100 years worth of memory, and then their memories kind of went away and they started over. They don't forget like basic things.
Let me explain a nitpick thing. They explain how eventually they lose things because the human mind can only remember so much stuff even after they rejuvenate it and make it refreshed. My only thing is, there were instances where he learned how to play the guitar, and even after he went through the process, he still remembered how to play guitar.
Because here's the thing, and they did some work to explain that away. Like, he was talking about cooking meals for the girl, and he said like his hands remembered how to make the meals. They don't forget how to talk. They don't forget how to walk. They don't forget how to do basic things, but they forget things that happened. Like, events that happened, they would forget, but like skills they learned, they retained. Anything, it was more like anything that involves muscle memory, they retain that. But like, who I was dating 500 years ago, you wouldn't necessarily remember that. That was how they explained it. So, it's weird, but for the purposes of the story, it worked better. You knew a big twist was coming, and of course a big twist came in this. So, in the first issue, I think it was, he got this, they had this listening station, because there's like this, they live up on a mountain, basically. And there's like a huge, like, dangerous electrical storm between the mountain and the ground that never goes away. And they just know the ground's dangerous, but there was this group called Forager, which he knew was the name of a group that they had sent down to inspect land, like the ground, and see if anybody was alive, because shit had gone bad for the humans who did not live up in the mountains with them. And he got a message from Forager, so he decided he had to go down, and he grabbed the girl who went down. The reason they had this sick girl was they were doing like genetic testing, and they found a gene that was basically an aging gene in mice. And they did tests on this gene, and they found that they could extend the life of the mice by like 35%.
Well, the thing is that they would rapidly age, and they found a way to not only stop the process but reverse it.
Yeah, but they could only get it to 35%. And then they realized, okay, we can't kick it up, but there's something in the gene or in this thing that's restricting the thing that makes you not age being released. So they removed that. And at first it didn't do anything, and then eventually the mice started they were getting younger. And then they maintained as long as you gave them like this pill, this medicine. You had to keep giving it to them. To do human tests, they needed someone who had a defect in this gene, and there were 2 people on Earth who had this. They described it as like an incredibly rare disease. They usually got it when they were like 4 years old, and they didn't stop aging, but they aged incredibly slowly. But what would happen is,
I think in the instance of the girl, her different parts of her body would age differently. Like I think
that's because of it. That's why they wouldn't live forever. Like they age slowly, but they said like they would look like an 8-year-old, but they would have like the hair, but they would be like 40, and they would have the hair of an old person. And like their liver would develop more than their kidneys, would develop more than their heart, and then their lungs would develop. Like the organs would develop at different paces. And eventually, the inconsistency would make the body fail, and they'd die.
Mm.
They were keeping her alive artificially because they basically used her to develop the drug. And at this point, they were just keeping her alive. They didn't need her anymore. They could produce the drug. But they were keeping her alive because she was what led to their immortality, and they kept saying they were going to fix her, but they never found a way. The main character, he was sort of the one who got her for them, like originally. Mm. So she was living this shit life, stuck in like a tube is basically where he found her. And he was going to take her to the surface, and they were going to go find humanity, get off the drugs so they wouldn't live forever, and, have a normal life. So he goes through all this shit of getting down to the surface, and he fights a fucking monster thing and sees a lot of weird shit. And then he finally, he sees, he has like a lightning rod that he was carrying with him so that when he goes through the storm, he wouldn't get hit. And it had Forager written on it, so he knows he's close. And then he sees a boat. Because what happened on the surface during the time they were up there was there was this shit that spread out, and it was killing everyone, so all the people moved to the coast. So he had to get to the coast. And he shows up, he gets to the boat with the girl, and the guy who started all this with him shows up, and he's got these fucking robots with guns. And he tells him, this is the swerve, you've done this before. He's like, every few cycles, and a cycle is 100 years.
Yeah, about 100 years, give or take.
Yeah, that's when they lose their memory. He's like, every few cycles, you'd find these journals you kept. And it was like the first 2 journals he wrote, and then he stopped. Every 4 or 5 cycles, you'd find these journals. And you would come down, and you would steal Claire, that was the name of the girl. You'd steal Claire, and you go off to find humanity. And one time, you went down, and you discovered that people, there weren't a lot of them, but they did come back, and they rebuilt society. He's like, and you came down with her, and you got on the boat, and you went out, and then you eventually turned around, and you came back, and you begged for us to take you back. He's like, you've done this multiple times, and every time you do it, you go less and less far.
Yeah, you travel less and less, yeah.
Yeah, you basically chicken out. And the important thing about this was he, this time, when he discovered the journals, he had the realization that basically he's been a coward his whole life. And this guy is telling him, you are a fucking coward. You do this every time. But he said, since each time you go out, you go less and less far. You're sort of like evolving. Like eventually you're going to realize you belong with us. And he's like, no, I don't. He's like, this time I'm really going to go. And they have a bit of an argument and a fight. No, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it. And the book actually ends without them showing if he did it or not, but he's got a foot in the water, so they're indicating he's actually going to do it. But what the guy told them was, and the important thing about this is, that guy had absolutely no reason to lie. He did not need either of them.
Well, you kind of got that for a second because they show the little girl and she's sort of panicking. She's like, no, I want to go. But
yeah, but he said she's done that every time too. But he had no reason to lie. That's the thing. He's like, so humanity rebuilt, but that was like 2,000 years ago. He's like, shit is worse now. That's all gone. There's no one alive down here. And he doesn't say, no, I don't believe you, but he's like, no, I'm leaving. And that was the important part. He didn't want to live this life anymore. This life of nothing, where things would, this thing would constantly repeat. He'd go 100 years and everything would be fine. He'd go 200, everything would be fine. 300, everything would be fine. 400, he'd find these fucking journals and he'd decide to do the same thing. The message he heard from Forager is a message he left to be played out, because the guy told him, you and Inez, this girl who he off and on been hooked up with, you guys were the Forager group. This was you. You were the ones who originally went down and said you were going to find people. You were the one who sent the message telling you to come down here. It was all you. You set all this up. It's always been you. And, now it's too late. There's nothing here. You can't even do it. But he didn't care, because this time he'd come to the realization that this was no life to live.
Yeah, he realizes that he's been running from death his entire life. There's even this instance where they talk about when he first was on the helicopter ride to get the immortality and live on top of the hill. At first he was like, I'm just petrified of death. I'm so worried about this death. It's always right around the corner. I've had to live with it my entire life. I saw my mom die, and I'm just, after a while, it's just like, he realized from writing all these books, he's like, there was never really an ending. There were like facts that he had, and there was some things that happened in his life, and for once he just said, you know what, I'm sick of running afraid anymore. This is a natural part of life. I'm just gonna live it out. I'm gonna finally write a book that has an ending.
Well, yeah, and the other thing was they told like the really powerful story in the last book about his mom when she was dying, and she was like kind of going crazy, and her son had died, and she was talking to him. And she was completely out of it. And she told him, like, oh, you're married now, and your brother's married and having a good life, and he's, finishing school and he's got a job. And then she suddenly, like he thought, she suddenly realized that was all bullshit, and she remembered what actually happened, and she like screamed. And this event is what made him so terrified of death. But he realized she wasn't screaming because that was all bullshit. That's not what the fear was, because he had the same reaction when he read the books. He's like, what she was screaming about was she'd realized that she had forgotten her life.
Mm-hmm.
And he realized that in living this way, where every 100 years your memories are all gone, he couldn't remember his life. And because of that, he couldn't remember who he was. And that was terrifying to him. That was way worse than
he
death.
Was starting to forget his mother's face. He was forgetting everything about his mother. If it wasn't for the books that he'd read, he forgot a lot of stuff. Like, in some stuff he instinctively knew, like the playing of the instruments and whatnot. But all the stuff that I think even he mentioned that stuff from his childhood he'd forgotten.
It was the important shit that he forgot.
Yeah.
Like, you can remember how to talk. You can remember how to cook. You can remember how to ride a bike. But you can't remember your own mother's face. You can't remember any of these important moments in your life, the things that are really important to us. Not things you can do, but things you experience. That's what you forget. And when you forget that, you're no longer who you are. Which isn't a profound statement, but it was told very well in this story in a really good way. And he basically, what they did was, they took this this examination of what human nature is, and they mixed it into a sci-fi story. But it being sci-fi didn't take away from the message they wanted to relate, and that was really cool. And this is something that I think if you went 6 issues like you were saying, I mean, did you mean it should be 6 issues like this should have been longer? Or did you mean it should be 6 issues? They should have divided it up into 22 pages each.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that what you meant?
That was my thing. It wasn't so much the reading that I had a problem with. It's just like 80 pages. I'm like, you're asking a lot. You're asking basically people like us and the Synder hardcores are the only people that are reading this book.
Yeah, and this was Lemire doing the art, right?
Yeah, this isn't Lemire writing. This isn't
Yeah. This is the best art I have seen him do in this book. Like he does Royal City, and I like Royal City, and I think it fits. The art in this I find to be much more impressive. Like some of the bigger page stuff, and to be fair, he's getting to draw more visually interesting stuff than what he does in Royal City, which is about a city and normal people.
Mm-hmm. And they all tweaked out like they're meth heads.
Yeah, like, I mean, they kind of look like that in this too, except going along with I think they're supposed to look like that in Royal City, the guy he talked to at the end looked fucking 100% normal.
Mm-hmm.
So he is drawing them like that on purpose now, I think.
I think it's also because it's like, okay, he draws a couple of panels in an 80-page book as opposed to I need to continue drawing these characters in a monthly.
He could put more time into it. You think that's it?
Yeah. But then, you know what? On the flip side, we've talked about this before. It's an Image title. It can come out whenever he wants it to come out.
Yeah.
Maybe there is something to what you were saying earlier, that maybe this is the way he wants it to look.